Hi, everyone. I'm Paris McKenzie, Biomanufacturing Track Lead of Career Catalyst. As most of you know, this Career Catalyst series is a part of the BioBuzz Talent Lab, a platform designed to help life science professionals like you access exclusive job opportunities, career development resources, expert advice, and industry events. This 45-minute program is broken into two parts, presentation and Q&A. Please note that we'll be recording the presentation here shortly, but we'll stop the recording for the Q&A portion. You'll be able to use the chat or raise your hand to ask any burning questions. Before we begin recording, I appreciate everyone taking a moment to mute themselves. And without further ado, let's get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Paris McKenzie, Biomanufacturing Track Lead of Career Catalyst, and I'm thrilled to be here today with our amazing special guest. And today we're joined by Dr. Tamara Baynham, a biomedical engineer, entrepreneur, and medical device industry leader with over 20 years of experience across R&D, intellectual property, and clinical and regulatory strategy. She's a registered USPTO patent agent and holds over 50 US patents spanning from neuromodulation and cardiovascular technologies. Dr. Baynham is the founder of Ingenuity Medical Device Research, LLC, where she advises emerging MedTech companies on IP development, regulatory and clinical strategy, and medical writing. She also mentors innovators through Vanderbilt's Wondery and the MIT Link Catalyst program. Before we get started, I want to thank our sponsors for today's session, Workforce Genetics and BioTrack. Workforce Genetics has been helping connect talent with high-performing teams for over 20 years, now powered by AI, making it faster and easier for growth-oriented, venture-backed life science companies to build great teams without the hassle or cost of traditional recruiting firms. And as always, a big thank you to BioTrack for sponsoring today's session. Their hands-on workshops have trained over 17,000 scientists. You can learn more at biotrack.com. I also want to mention that this event is a part of the BioBuzz Talent Lab, your one-stop shop for career growth, job opportunities, and industry connections. Join our Talent Lab today for more opportunities like this. Now let's get started, and I'll hand it over to our amazing special guest.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Okay, so today I'm going to be talking to you all about de-risking MedTech, building FDA and investor-ready development plans. Go to the next slide. So I'm going to give you guys a quick introduction to the device development process. So you come up with an idea, and then you go to the invention and prototyping stage. And that prototyping stage, as you can see, is an iterative process through preclinical and clinical testing, several rounds of that. And once you get to the pivotal clinical study, that's when you will complete that clinical validation study and get your regulatory decision and launch your product. And as well as after that launch, you're not finished, you still have some post-market monitoring to do. Next slide. So the first, during this talk, I'm going to talk to you guys about several ways that you can de-risk that device development strategy that we just talked about. The first way to de-risk it is to understand that you need to design milestones and have a staged prototype process. So the stages of prototyping include the proof of concept stage, which is a stage where you are validating the fundamental idea at the lowest cost. So this is a non-functional model that you are using here. Then the alpha is the functional version, your first functional version, where you can test some function and get initial user feedback. Then we graduate to the beta phase where you approach the final design and you're allowing for more rigorous testing in this case. Then we get to the pilot version of the prototype that closely mirrors the final device design the user experience as well as the function. And this is usually the prototype that is used for your pivotal study that you're going to be using to obtain your regulatory approvals. Next slide. The next de-risking strategy is really based on making sure that you are answering the right questions at the right time. Clinical studies can be very costly. So this is one of the places where your ability to be capital efficient is going to be tested. So you'll have to really make sure that you are answering the right questions with the right set of patients and the right study designs. So the first type of study is an early feasibility study. And an early feasibility study is a limited investigation that's intended to gain initial insights into clinical safety and device delivery. And the early feasibility study is spelled out in FDA guidance, so you can look and see the differences between an early feasibility and a feasibility study, which actually focuses on preliminary safety and efficacy using that near final device design, usually that beta prototype that we just talked about. Once you have solidified your clinical strategy, you've worked out the kinks in your device design, now you're ready for your pilot version of your prototype and your pivotal study. And this pivotal study is where the major milestones are designed to collect the definitive evidence that you need for safety and effectiveness for your final market entry. Next slide. Now, this is one of the primary causes of rework is definitely ignoring usability until the final stages of your device development. So it's important to integrate human factors and usability early on as you're doing your prototype development, going through your stages of prototype development. You should be adding user testing and usability throughout this process to help to de-risk your device design. So some aspects of human factor studies are user interviews. So in user interviews, you are engaging patients and healthcare professionals primarily to define the use environments of your technology. Another really good tactic to use is task analysis. So task analysis is a way to systematically identify potential use areas to inform design requirements. So basically a task analysis, you write a list of, from the time the end user, whether it's the patient or the clinician, depending on what type of device you have, from the time they get the device to the end of their use, all the steps in between is really just starting to put that list together. And while you're putting that list together, you also put together what can actually happen to the end use areas at each of these steps. And this is a really good way for you to systematically determine what kinks need to be worked out in your device design. And another type of testing is usability testing. So there's formative evaluations that you can use throughout the development to ensure that the final device is intuitive and safe. Next slide, please. So waiting until the final submission to talk to the FDA is one of the most high-risk things you could possibly do in terms of your device development. So the Q submission program is a program that provides a formal pathway for your feedback. So the pre-submission is one reason that you would use the Q-Sub program. So you can, before you submit your IDE, which is an investigational device exemption. So an investigational device exemption is a formal okay by the FDA that you can use an investigational device before that has significant risk. So before you can use an investigational device in a patient that's deemed to be significant risk, you have to get a formal IDE from the FDA. So that's one filing that you would want to do pre-submissions with the FDA. 510K filings as well as when you're doing a PMA. Another reason why you might use the Q-Sub program would be for study risk determinations. So study risk determinations is used to confirm whether or not your device is significant risk before starting a trial. One reason why you might do this, for instance, you may think that your device is a class 2 device and you submit to your IRB, and your IRB doesn't agree with you. So that's one reason why you might do submit to get a study risk determination, to get the final say from the FDA whether or not they believe your risk is significant risk, class 3, or a non-significant risk, or class 2 device. Another reason to do a Q-Sub is that you might have a submission issue request. So a submission issue request basically happens after you have submitted your formal 510K or IDE or PMA, and the FDA has sent back some questions. So if you have some concerns about some of the issues that the FDA brought up, you might do a submission focused on these submission issues. So you might request more guidance, or have need more information about what the FDA has suggested. And this is a place where you can avoid lengthy delays if you, instead of just resubmitting, if you can get more clarity about what the FDA wants. So the Q-Sub program is free, so you don't need a user fee to use the Q-Sub program. So this is something that you should definitely be using throughout your device development. Next slide. As I talked about earlier, clinical studies is typically where you're going to be stretched thin with your capital. So one of the things that investors look for is that you are able to produce reproducible and high quality data that ensure that their capital is well placed. So what they're looking for is that you have clear objectives in your study. So you have defined the primary and secondary endpoints that actually support a regulatory approval, as well as gone through a formal site qualification. So it's often, startups often like to go to people that they've worked with to do the testing on their devices, or the people at their clinic, at their university. But it's really important to make sure that you have a systematic way to evaluate your clinical sites based on the PI's experience, as well as the resources of the facility that you're using. So it's very important for you to have the best, to get the best outcomes, is to make sure that you have the best team that you can testing your device. And another really important point is data integrity. So it's very important to make sure that you have implemented a system for making sure that you are getting the data, the data, and it's being captured in compliance with your protocol. So you want to implement a risk-based monitoring strategy, as well as ensuring compliance to prevent those failed studies. So you need to have a systematic way that you monitor the data, as well as the site's performance as you're going through those studies. Next slide, please. Oh, I think I've gone pretty fast through this presentation, so we can talk a little bit. We'll have more time for questions. So basically, the key takeaways that I have for this talk is to understand that de-risking is really an iterative process of identifying and correcting all the design flaws and the regulatories before they become deal killers for you. So what de-risking means in real life. So some of the top regulatory and clinical risks that kill deals in timeline include what I was talking about earlier, not using that Q-sub program early and often. So it's really important for you to understand what the FDA is looking for in terms of their. So if you have a class 3 device or a significant risk device, you're going to be looking at biocompatibility studies that you're going to have to do. You're going to need to be working, then they're going to need to understand how you are manufacturing the device that you're using. So they're going to have questions about the materials that you're going to be using. So this is a place where you can get guidance from the FDA to help you to understand what your specific study needs are. In the second bullet point, we're talking about how to design capital efficient milestones that satisfy FDA scrutiny and investor diligence. So we talked about that proof of concept. Stage proof of concept that you need to do to make sure that you are kind of walking through each component of your device. You are implementing that human factors along the way when you're doing those designs. And additionally, you're asking the right questions at the right time. So are you doing an early feasibility study? And what's the reason for doing this early feasibility study? Are you trying to figure out if you're doing a neuromodulation device, for instance? Are you looking at whether or not what you're doing is safe for the subject? Are you looking at trying to define stimulation parameters? That might be a feasibility study if you've gotten that far. So understanding the questions that you're asking and being really specific about designing those primary and secondary objectives that are going to get you the answers that you need to move yourself towards approval. Additionally, making sure that you have a systematic site selection process, as well as a system for monitoring the clinical site's performance, as well as their the data that you're getting. And another key de-risking is thinking about those early decisions that can prevent delays, rework, and failed studies later. And the main thing that I see I've seen in my work is not implementing human factors early in that study. So I can't reiterate that enough, is actually implementing user feedback as well as systematic usability analysis throughout your design process.